Let me get to, as I understand your argument, and feel free to correct me if I misstate it, is that you're arguing that people have an obligation to stick to their ideological principles, but our evidence of loyal opposition is that there is a compromise that results. What if my ideological, well, one, make sure that I haven't misstated your position, and two, what if my ideological principles tell me that the provision on which I'm voting is not something on which I should compromise? Does that just make me an obstructionist?
I don't think it does make you an obstructionist. I think that certainly you should stick to your ideological principles, and if that means that compromise is impossible, then that means that compromise is impossible. Fortunately, most people are willing to compromise, and by sticking to your ideological principles, compromise is, you're able to easily get to a compromise.
I think the idea here also is that you're not blocking legislation just because maybe it'll get you higher in the polls, or because you're trying to agree with some other thing, but that it's actually your principles that causes you to disagree with legislation if that is how you feel.
I disagree with Hannah. I think today, though that might have been the case a long time ago, since Ulysses S. Grant's administration, lobby groups have played an increasingly bigger role in American politics, and because of that, people might not just stick to their ideological principles, but might also stick to the lobby groups that are lobbying.
Or might stick to their constituents, right? I mean, if I'm here to represent my constituents, so if we have a relatively homogeneous population, maybe I'm sticking to what they want. But that's...
Yeah, in your opening presentation, and since you've discussed the filibuster as part of obstructionism, but you've also mentioned that the role of the opposition is to further the marketplace of ideas. In the current filibuster, you can just say we filibuster and that's the end of it, but it used to be the practice where you actually had to hold the floor and state your views. So would that change your view of the filibuster if we had the old practice of making people stand on their feet and keep explaining themselves, or do you think just as a categorical rule the filibuster is an obstructionist tool?
That would definitely change my view on the filibuster. As seen as when you used to have to debate for a long time, such as Strom Thurmond, sometimes what you are filibustering ends up getting passed because people finally realize that they want to compromise because they don't want to debate any longer. After he gave a 24-hour filibuster at 18 minutes, it ended up that his filibuster failed ultimately. And I think that now, if you don't have 60 cloture votes, you can't block a filibuster.
I would absolutely agree with Robin. The essential idea behind a filibuster, which the Senate made as a rule under Article 1, Section 5, is that people will be able to debate issues and not just get it passed before they get to express their opinions. So I think you bring up a great idea, and also New York University Vice Dean of the Law School, Mr. Friedman, talked about this, and how that if we brought it back to a one-track system and got rid of this informal rule of, moving past a filibuster and being able to debate other things, then there would be more of a consequence to the minority, and they would actually get their points across rather than just being able to block anything.
I would disagree. I feel that the filibuster is by nature tyranny of the minority. It's just a tool for the minority to get up and slow down the legislative process. If they want to be the loyal opposition and get their opinions heard and put into the bill, they can do that in debate. They don't need to stand up and completely monopolize the floor of the Senate for hours on end to do that.
I'm going to steal one of your questions.
Okay.
What is the role of media with respect to loyal opposition?
I think one effect that media has is oftentimes it polarizes the amount of partisanship or lack of bipartisanship that we have. We see that Justice Stevens is going to retire at the end of this session, and we've seen that many media shows are saying, oh, this is going to be a huge showdown, so much disagreement, and just lack of bipartisanship. But then when you're actually looking at interviews with Republican senators, they talk about how civil they want this to be and how they're not just going to try to block everything.
One interesting thing to note note with media is that talk shows that were political used to have to present both points of an issue, but nowadays that's been changed, so now we can just have as extreme to one side as you want with no compensation on the other.
I think that media should ideally show both sides of the issue. However, today we don't see that as the case. For example, when the issue of Guantanamo Bay being shut down came up, on the GOP website, they made this video that basically showed that if Guantanamo Bay would be shut down, then all the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay would be free to roam all around the world however they wish, and they would not be captured. And that is not the case.
The media even played a role in the original debates during the ratification period. The Federalist Papers and newspapers were primarily owned by Federalists in cities, and so the Federalist Papers got more attention than anti-Federalist papers.
Okay. You mentioned, you expanded, I want to expand on that question because you brought up the web, you mentioned the website. Are there changes in the media going on that would affect what we were just talking about, the impact of the media?
I think absolutely. As you pointed out, now that there's websites and you can access information immediately, it sort of brings about advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages are that you can become a more educated citizen just by, Googling any issue and finding both sides. But also, we see that perhaps newspapers with more money can get their ideas across more easily through these ways like the internet.
I would say that the development of technology has actually really caused the media's effect on politics to be very detrimental. With the development of the internet, anybody can post anything on the internet anonymously, and that means that they cannot be held accountable for the things they say or do, which means that you get a lot of really extreme viewpoints put out there with little backing up, but since nobody needs to hold them accountable, those are what we're seeing and reading.
I would agree with Alan. As we see that newspapers are starting to have declining use and people do not want to use them anymore, and now they're kind of resorting to blogs and news TV and news on TV, and it's really seen that the quality of the news is going down, and we don't have reporters such as those that uncovered Watergate or the wiretapping being able to present these facts because it's all based around the internet and bloggers.
I would argue that the increase in media actually has a positive effect. Because back then, they would only have newspapers bringing about information, but now we can access everything on the internet with increased speed.